For this portion of running records, you will be looking at slides 11 through 19. This section will be focusing on miscue analysis of analyzing the reading behaviors of a student. A miscue is an unexpected calling of a word or section of text. A miscue says something other than the exact printed word. So when we analyze the errors that the child made, if you look over here on this image, we've already analyzed we've already determined what was an error and self-corrections, but I want to take it a step further to take a look at these errors and what miscues the child is using to make that error. What caused the child to say something other than what was in the printed text? This will help us make instructional decisions of what the child is using and not using for improving reading behaviors. So the three cueing systems we're going to take a look at are meaning, structure, and visuals. Not only do you analyze each error, it's also important to analyze the self-corrections. What caused the child to go back and self-correct? The first one we're going to take a look at are the meaning cues. M on the scripted page stands for meaning cues. The meaning cues relate to a reader's ability to gather a book's basic message by making meaning of the text and the content. They're also using picture cues. They're also using background knowledge. Let's take a look at this and see an example for meaning. In the text, it says, "There are many trees in the forest." However, the student said woods instead of forest. There are many trees in the woods. This is a meaning miscue because it makes sense. It does not take away from the meaning of the text. Something to think about is, does the child's attempt to make sense considering the story background, information from pictures, and the meaning in the sentence? Does it make sense? Structure cues. Structure cues readers rely on their knowledge of grammar and structure of the English language to make the text sound right. So let's go back to our original sentence. Here we have, "There are many trees in the forest." The student said, "There are many trees in the woods." We already determined that it does make sense. The child used meaning. However, in the sense of structure, does it make sense or does it sound right grammatically in the English language? Yes, it does. When I read, "There are many trees in the woods," it sounds grammatically correct and syntactically correct in the English language. So you ask yourself, does it sound right? Yes, it does. So for this particular case, for the word forest that was substituted with woods, the child used meaning and structure. In understanding visual cues include the way letters and words look. In this sentence, the text said, "I swim in a pool." However, the child said pour instead of pool. "I swim in a pour." Well, it definitely doesn't make sense. So it's not meaning. It definitely does not sound correct grammatically in the English language, so it's not structure, but it definitely is visual because they share similar letter patterns. So here's a little funny little comic strip I found. "Are you the new English teacher?" "Yes, I are." So which system did the teacher use here to make that miscue analysis? I'll leave that up to you to think about it. Self-corrections. It's important to analyze what cues were probably used when a self-correction was made. Just as you analyze the errors to think about what caused the child to make that miscue, the same way here you have to think about what caused the child to self-correct. Other things to think about is the other types of errors a child does during a running record. With omissions and substitutions, why do you think the child changed the text? What caused the child to omit or substitute? Insertions, why do you think the child inserted those words? Repetitions, what do you think made might have caused the child to go back and repeat the word, phrase, or sentence. What was the next word? There are some children who make so many repetitions, and you're thinking, what's causing them to do that? Self-correction. What caught the child's attention and caused him or her to self-correct? So not only are you analyzing the errors and you're doing your miscue analysis, you also want to take into consideration the other errors that the child is making and think about what's causing him or her to do these things. And other things to think about as well is decoding attempts. What cueing systems does the child use to figure out those tricky words, those unfamiliar words? Is sounding out enough of a clue? Do they over rely on one strategy over the other? Is the child able to use other strategies to help? Or are they just consistently using that same one over and over again? Were the individual letters used blended? Did the child use syllables, word families, or phrases? So by analyzing the decoding strategies the child is consistently using, it'll give you an insight to what are the next steps in increasing the child's decoding strategies. Additional observations and comments. As you're doing your running records, it's important to document other behaviors that you observe as well while the child is reading and you're watching them read. Are they finger pointing? Are they whisper reading? Do they use picture cues? Do they preview the text before reading? How's their fluency? Is it monotone? Is it robotic? Is it smooth? It's just, these are all the pieces of information that you need to consider in addition to just conducting a running record. Book position. How is the child handling the book? Is he or she squinting? Book handling. It's just all these pieces really give you more insight into a child's reading behaviors. With the running records, as we're looking over at progress over time, we monitor for the level of text. Is the child increasing their levels from when they started with their interventions and evidence-based programs, or whatever the case is? How are the running records indicating our next steps for this child? We are now looking at accuracy rate, self-correction rate, the MSV patterns. All this is something that we document and we take a close look over time. Once again, we need to keep in mind that the information that we're gaining, that we want to communicate with the parents as well as the other educators that the child is involved with. So this is just a little quick snapshot of miscue analysis.